Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
This week on Red, White, and Blue, an in-depth discussion on energy, a plan for Texas. Joining us, three distinguished guests. First, Barry Smitherman, chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission. Next, Bruce Vincent, president of Swift Energy Company, major energy producer in Houston. And finally, Patrick Seeba, who's project manager of the Greater Houston Port Bureau. And David, I know we'll get an explanation for what that all means at some point.
I hope so. But, I have to give these fellas an opportunity to discuss that which is on the front page, until I'm challenged otherwise, And what I read that I'd like to get all three of you reacting to, because all of you have come from different viewpoints, is the report from the Presidential Commission on the BP spill. And, it was co-chaired by Bob Graham, former Florida governor, William Riley, EPA chairman under George Bush 41. And they basically said there are two groups of people that did well with responding to the spill. Industry and the administration. But they said that there were other actors who were complete failures, including the United States Congress, which has failed completely to put into place any of the regulatory recommendations that they made into law. So what do y'all think about our spill damage control efforts so far?
Well, Congress probably does deserve some poor grades because of the politics of it. The politics are keeping us from developing good policy. We need to get the politics out of policy and focus on good policy. However, one of the reasons Congress didn't implement a number of those things is industry actually got together with the regulatory agencies and implemented a number of these things on their own. Didn't necessarily need Congress to act. But one of the other reasons Congress hasn't acted is a consternation among some of the senators in particular. Is a bipartisan effort to try to put in revenue sharing for the states. And some people are against that. And so that's one of the things that's held up any legislation in the Senate at least.
David, I would challenge the assertion that the administration did a great job because drilling permits in the Gulf are not back to pre-Macondo levels. I was recently in Gulfport, Mississippi, and that economy along the Gulf Coast is still hurting because they are not seeing the kind of drilling activity that we had pre-Macondo. And it's been a long time now since that accident occurred. So putting the moratorium in place actually made the situation worse economically for all those people from Galveston all the way over to Mississippi and Alabama who rely upon the Gulf Coast oil and gas industry for their jobs.
And I'm sure you know that since the spill of 2010, there have been three major accidents from three other companies, one China, one in the North Sea, one off the coast of Brazil. So this still seems to be a systemic problem that industry is not facing.
It is one, however, that industry is addressing. In fact, one of the things that the Gulf area, I think, does better than really any other region in America is try to address safety, security, and environmental concerns with coalitions and partnerships so they can address issues before they come up. Because at the end of the day, what business wants, what business needs to be successful, to do things like provide jobs and create that growth, is to have continuity and consistency so that they're able to make plans that are going a little further than just right down the road and in response. They need to be able to be proactive, and business, in order to do that, gets together with each other and tries to solve
and
solve
I
those
do want to
issues.
talk about this, and Commissioner Smitherman, you have some observations since you run the chairman of the Railroad Commission. You regulate oil and gas. If you listen to what David says, it's like the glass is half full. My God, we drill for oil offshore, and we have all these oil spills. What a disaster it is. But isn't the truth really the other side? The glass is actually half full, not half empty. We have great success in oil drilling where we don't have problems. Why don't we talk about what percent are we successful when we drill that we don't have the environmental issues that David's so concerned about?
Almost 100% of the time. And in fact, good old American ingenuity is finding and recovering oil and gas where we never thought we would get it. We're on the road, actually, to energy independence just by looking at onshore resources like the new shale plays, for example. What I would like to see us do, though, is open up the rest of the Gulf of Mexico for exploration, including on the western and eastern sides of Florida, because we are unable today to drill in that area. President Obama took that back off limits after President Bush had opened up those areas. And because we're unable to explore in those areas, you continue to see us going either away from America or into deeper water. But the oil and gas industry has a great track record of using safe, innovative, creative technology, and when there's a problem, reacting quickly to resolve the problem.
Bruce,
Well, in
Vincent,
fact,
I was going to let me ask you this as you comment, though. Is it good business practice to be sloppy and let massive oil spills happen on your watch? Is that how your company, Swift Energy, would make money?
Absolutely not. In fact, it's more expensive if you have that problem. One of the
I
things
thought
that
so.
people don't really appreciate is that our industry are environmental stewards. Our people live and work in the same communities they drill the wells. They fish, they hunt, they have outdoor activities in the same places they drill the wells. So they make every effort to have a good, clean, healthy, friendly environment to raise their families in as well. But one of the other things about policy, if we look at what the moratorium did to offshore, one of the things the administration is currently doing is trying to take credit for the growth in oil and natural gas production in the United States in the last 3+ years.
Don't they deserve it?
The fact of the matter is that growth of production is coming on private
It's
and
all
state
private
lands.
land.
It's
Right.
decreasing on federal lands. A lot of that's in the Gulf of Mexico, a direct result of the moratorium and the reduction in activity because you aren't putting out the permits.
Well, I'm not a fisherman, so I don't know what to make of what I just saw on a video today. But they are bringing up from the deepest waters of the Gulf of Mexico eyeless shrimp and fish with lesions all over them, obviously contaminated from something, and it's only off the coast of Louisiana, not Florida. So let's go take risks at Florida. But when are we going to find out what the damage was?
Well, we'll certainly find out, but let's not jump to conclusions and all of a sudden think because you have an eyeless shrimp that is coming from the Macondo blowout. I mean, that's a significant leap without having the science to back it up. One of the things we've seen onshore is the EPA's made that mistake. They've jumped out ahead of the facts and the science 3 different occasions onshore in the past couple of years, both in Texas and Pennsylvania and Wyoming. We need to get the facts, we need to do the research, we need to get the science, and then we can understand what's causing something.
The other thing, David, to keep in mind is we have choices. We can either drill domestically in the U.S., offshore, open up Alaska more, or we can import. And when we import, we bring it in from places like Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Not only is their environmental stewardship not nearly as good as ours, but those are undemocratically elected despots in many cases, and I don't know why we would do business with them if we have the resource available in America.
Well, in fact, unreliable as well. Barry touched on it earlier, is there are several very credible forecasts that actually show the United States becoming the leading producer of oil in the world somewhere between 2017 and 2020. The forecasts differ slightly. But that's directly as a result of advanced technology and the industry out there making it happen in these shale plays and tight rock plays. That's pretty phenomenal. Most people thought of the oil and gas industry as an industry in its twilight years. It was a bunch of old gray-haired
Guess they
men
were
ready to
wrong.
go home.
Let me ask
The
you about
best
this, though.
example
It's
of that
been reinvigorated.
is the shale drilling. It's the fact that at the end of the day, predictions that were made in the 60s and 70s saying we're going to hit this peak ended up not taking into account,
Technology.
as the commissioner said,
Advances in
technology,
yeah.
and at the end of the day, American ingenuity and the ability to get materials out of the ground that were once thought lost and unrecoverable.
Given the massive amounts of natural gas we're now producing because of advanced American technology, what are we going to do with all that natural gas?
Well, we're going to grow demand. And you're starting to see that happen. It just takes time to do that. I heard the other day of a methanol plant, of all things, that's moving a train from Chile into Louisiana. Who ever thought you would have methanol being produced in the United States again? You're having ammonia plants that had shut down and moved overseas reopened. Chemical companies, petrochemical companies. In fact, the headlines, I think there was an article in today's paper about Dow building a new plant. And they're utilizing natural gas as a feedstock, or they're utilizing natural gas liquids as feedstocks. You're adding ethane cracking capacity. We're going to be exporting, for instance, propanes and butanes because we're making enough of them here. You talk about the natural gas supply, and people have heard a lot about the 100-plus year supply, and we've done that in the last couple of years. What's happening today, though, is also remarkable. The industry's diverting capital from these dry gas plays, because the economics aren't good, into liquid-rich plays. And over the next couple of years, you're going to see the industry do that same very thing. That's where these liquids are going to come from to grow the oil production in this country, to overtake Russia, to overtake Saudi Arabia.
And
Well,
we're
Mr.
already,
Smitherman,
we're
let me
already
ask-
seeing that.
Sorry.
We're already seeing that in such a manner that the exports are able to come out of this area. Houston, at the end of the day, is a net exporter of goods, and the reason that is because, as you were saying, you're seeing some of these refineries, these manufacturing facilities switch to the cheaper fuel. They're investing in their own infrastructure because they see natural gas as a possibility to provide not only the feedstock but the material that they're burning for the refining process.
Which ought to be good news for the economy in Texas.
Well, what it's doing is a couple of years ago the industry was a little more, let's go with nervous about the fact that you could do it cheaper in Southeast Asia, but now you're able to do it in the United States, in Texas, because we have the natural gas resources, we have the manufacturing capacity, and we have the capacity to transport it to anywhere in the world.
I was wanted to ask Barry, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I really you have to react to this, which I read today, and see whether or not you agree with the new rules, the new EPA rules, that are being placed on the fracking process
Right.
in order to suppress, control the emissions of benzene and methane with new equipment on the 13,000 wells, and the extension of time that the industry was given to comply. What do you make of that?
Well, this is one of probably a dozen different EPA regulations, all of which are targeted at the oil and gas and coal industries. We're concerned about them because they all came down at once. It was called the regulatory train wreck, appropriate for a railroad commissioner to be cognizant of this. And it has some definite impacts on the potential reliability of our electric grid, our ability to keep the lights on, because we burn a lot of coal and a lot of natural gas to make electricity in Texas. So we need to be careful as we go forward that the cumulative effect on all of these regulations is not very harmful and creates a reliability issue. And in fact, I've sued the EPA half a dozen times on all of these. Every time we get to court, we win. This particular one I'm concerned about, in spite of the fact that it's been delayed for 3 years. It requires you to capture all the methane at the wellhead. The EPA says, well, you ought to be in favor of this because you can sell that methane. The reality is, where we are drilling is primarily in remote places, West Texas, South Texas, the Panhandle, and the oil and gas drilling activity has outpaced the pipeline infrastructure. So we are working as quickly as we can to get the pipe there, to grab the gas, take it to the processing plant or the refinery. And when we get that all put in place, this will not be an issue. But if we have to shut in any wells in order to meet that requirement, that is bad for the oil and gas industry. It's bad for revenues. It's bad for the people who work in that particular industry. And the EPA admitted, David, in the preamble to this rule, that currently the industry is in compliance with these requirements on VOCs and NOx and SO2, but they were putting this rule in place proactively because they thought that the amount of activity would rise so rapidly.
That's what the government is supposed to do, right?
The other thing,
is be proactive.
Well, proactive in a science-based
exactly,
way, not in a way
exactly.
that is
Yeah.
based on political
Is methane
considerations.
20 times more powerful than CO2 in terms of contributing to global warming?
Certainly the administration, which has as its priority fighting global warming, thinks that this is a real problem. But what they don't realize is that there are benefits to natural gas over coal, for example, that are more significant than the release occasionally of methane or CO2. You know, gas has a fraction of the NOx and SO2. It has no particulate matter, and we have a lot of it. So the administration ought to be encouraging the use of natural gas and the development to get that gas to the surface,
But they don't.
instead of throwing up roadblocks.
In fact, I was going to ask, one of my concerns is that with the administration taking, Obama and his friends taking strong stance against coal, making it difficult for the power industry to expand plants that are coal-fired, and I guess there are issues with natural gas-fired plants too. What is our future since the Obama administration wants everyone driving electric cars? I don't understand how we're going to be able to power them up if we don't have the capacity.
Well, I was going to add to the last question. We actually have a great opportunity to use gas in the power generation sector going forward. And we are seeing in Texas this year, we're using more gas than we have in the past. Our mix of gas to coal is significantly heavier in gas, and that is going to be the case going forward. It will be virtually impossible to build a new coal plant in America. We do need to keep the existing plants running because they are really the workhorse across the country of electric generation. Here, they're only about 40%, and someplace in the United States, they're 50 or 60%. So if you close them down too soon, places are going to go dark, and they're going to lose jobs. Yeah. But we will see gas used in both power generation and in vehicles in the not-too-distant future, both light trucks, fleet trucks, and maybe even cars, I think, Bruce, at some scale within the next 5 or 6 years.
Is that a huge technological leap, Bruce, to go take natural gas and start using it to power our cars as opposed to gasoline?
No, absolutely not at all. It's strictly just an infrastructure issue. We know natural gas works as a very good fuel source. What we don't have is infrastructure in place. You don't have the cars constructed in a way that burn natural gas. You don't have the filling stations located around that are convenient. We actually bought a compressed natural gas car back in the mid-'90s, and there were like 5 or 6 places in the entire metropolitan statistical area that you could fill it up. Today, I think there's less than that. What you can do, though, is you can put compressors in your house. We can build infrastructure, and as you do that, you'll also find the automobile manufacturers wanting to build that into the cars when they come off the line.
And they're talking about that now. 2 of the big 3 are saying that in the near future they're going to have pickup trucks from the factory that can run on dual fuel. Gasoline and natural gas.
Nobody ever talks about public health, so let me address. Since we have viewer mail,
David,
we care a lot about public health.
We're about to find out. We have viewer mail here, and to the representative here of the Port of Houston, the Port Bureau. A fellow who grew up in the east side of Houston, Texas, back in the '60s. His dad worked at Todd Shipyard. Says that he and his brothers suffered horribly from bronchitis, including hospitalizations. And he said that everything started improving after the port asked the transporters to put tops and covers and tarps on the thousands of trucks and trailers and wide open barges that crowded in and out of the roads and waterways of the ship channel. And his question is, why should we be worried about the EPA when it took that kind of recommendation from citizen complaints to even get someone to do that modest effort at protecting public health?
Well, I think what I'll do is I'll answer that question by taking what you've told me just here, is that at the end of the day, what it took was, in this case, a citizen complaint, but what it took was private industry going in and saying, what do we need to do to fix this problem? It took private industry looking at it and saying, okay, this is an issue. It's one that's been brought to our attention. How do we go about fixing it in the most expedient, responsible manner possible? Because at the end of the day, as it's been mentioned by all 3 of us here, all of industry wants to do what is going to allow them to continue to grow, to continue to create jobs, to continue to be responsible. And the way you do that is by being an environmental steward. It's why, for example, when infrastructure projects go in to do things like maintain the channel, what have you, every single one of them comes with an environmental mitigation, with a series of studies that say, what is the impact of this project? What is being done to mitigate anything that is created by this project? How is it going to be moving forward? And there are numerous agencies, both on the local, the state, and the federal level, that are looking at it and saying, what are you doing to remain in compliance? At the end of the day, if you give us standards that we can meet them. But it's when the targets keep shifting, it's when you get a knee-jerk reaction that is the problem that creates a situation of uncertainty that doesn't allow industry to
Let me add this.
compliance.
I grew up on the east side, David, in Hollis. Maybe that's my excuse.
It's telling.
Thank you.
It's showing, yeah.
Great place to be from, by the way. The problem I have with the EPA is they always overstate the benefits. For example, there's a recent rule called the Mercury Air Toxin Standard, which applies to coal plants and basically is designed, or ostensibly designed, to reduce mercury emissions from U.S. coal plants. Supposedly, according to the EPA, the benefits are $160 billion a year. The cost is $100 billion, so therefore we should do it. When you really drill down into the benefits, 99% of them are the reduction in particulate matter, not mercury, where we already have other EPA regulations that are directed at reducing particulate matter. The mercury benefit is something like $6 or $7 million a year. So they are hiding or masking or over-calculating benefits in order to achieve a goal. And the rest of the story is most of the mercury falling out of the United States comes from China. It doesn't come from the U.S. And yet this rulemaking will cost us billions and billions of dollars. They're not straight with the American people and industry about the cost and benefits.
Yeah, but
I'm
they
sure
are.
EPA is going to regulate prevailing winds sooner or later.
I bet they will. But they are straight about
They could,
alternative
they would.
energy, too, though, right? Because they said, the administration said we should have solar energy and we can make this work. We're ready to transition. They spent $500 million with Solyndra. They went bankrupt. I'm not sure any of their alternative energy investments paid off or have paid off. Let's look at the near future. In the next 100 years, is it realistic to think that any of the schemes the administration has to not use fossil fuels is going to have any significant impact on day-to-day energy use by the American people?
I mean, fossil fuels are roughly 85% of the energy supply that we use today. And if you look at most credible forecasts over the next many, many decades to come, it's still going to be in that 80+% range. Oil and natural gas by themselves is almost 2/3, just a little short of that, and it's going to be 60+% over the next several decades. You ought to focus on where you're getting the majority of your supply from and focus on security of it, so focus on bringing lower cost supplies into America, and we can do that. The industry can do that. You know, I was thinking something earlier when you were talking about public health, but a lot of that comes back with public-private partnerships, when you get the public working together with private enterprise, because we want the same thing. A really great example that's actually being headlined by the Texas Railroad Commission is the Eagleford Shale. The title of the show is about Texas and energy in the future. The Eagleford Shale is predicted to be the single largest economic event that ever hit South Texas. It's phenomenal what's going on down there. Now, with that growth, though, creates problems, and the Railroad Commission actually has headed up a task force with public and private involvement to try to manage and plan for a lot of that growth so that they manage their way through it instead of having all these problems that occur because of uncharted growth.
So who's going to be the first one of this panel who's going to say that, you know, the government really just can't do anything right now to bring the price of a gallon of gasoline down? Who's going to make that claim?
Well, at Texas A&M, they taught us supply and demand, David. So we need to increase supply. When you increase supply, prices come down. Part of the reason prices are high is that there's so much uncertainty in the Middle East, and those that have to deliver petroleum to their customers to have it refined can't take the chance of being short, so they're buying up as much as they can, and that drives the price up.
So we really should blame the Israelis for stirring up the Iranians, and we would. And there,
That's right.
how much are they responsible for that?
Dave's part of the
extra-
blame.
I was going to say, we
$1
can blame a lot of people if we want to. The fact of the matter is it comes back to this country for multi-presidents not having a cohesive energy strategy.
Or for that matter, a transportation strategy in many sectors. Like he was saying, when the pipeline infrastructure isn't getting there where it is.
Oh, you mean like Keystone, the pipeline?
When the maritime
president doesn't want to
infrastructure
build?
isn't where it is, where you took a shot earlier in the beginning at discussing the report about reaction. You said, Congress didn't do what they're needing to do. One of the things that needs to be addressed in this country at the end of the day is a national maritime strategy. If a third of our GDP is tied to global trade and 95% of that moves on the water, why is there no national plan that sits there and says this is where the infrastructure is going to be? We have 191 co-sponsors on a bill to dredge America's harbors, but can't get it out of committee. One of the things that it was finally added to the surface transportation bill yesterday, and it's gone through. And I think that finally the victory there is stimulating the discussion that's saying our ports and harbors are important, and they're what's getting the cargo in and out. If I go to the west side of Houston and I say there's a port here, half the time I get a blank stare, and that's a problem. And that's something that needs to be addressed because it's what keeps a city like this vibrant and growing.
By the way, what does the Port of Houston have to do with the city of Tomball? Do you know?
Okay, David.
The answer, I guess.
I look forward to hearing.
I just heard it.
Yes, okay.
A congressman named Tom Ball came up with the idea for the Port of Houston in 1890.
And that's
just
natural gas from David.
just amazes me.
Okay, but I did talk about Keystone Pipeline, and instead of asking y'all, I'm going to ask him.
Oh.
Don't you think your president has made a huge mistake in not allowing Keystone Pipeline to go forward from Canada to Ardmore, Oklahoma, so the oil comes to Texas and refined here as opposed to being shipped to China?
I don't want any of that dirty oil from Canada coming down here.
The thing is, it's going to get built.
Sure, it is.
It's stupid to wait a year because of politics. We get politics in front of policy too much, and we need to just get it out of the way.
But Barry knows it's not going to add that many jobs. It's not going to bring the price of gasoline down.
Actually, it is going to add jobs. It's about 800 to 900,000 barrels a day of Canadian crude coming into Port Arthur, Mount Belvieu, and other places along the eastern Texas shoreline. And that crude could actually displace Venezuelan crude. In fact, it's of a similar quality as Venezuelan crude. So what happens today? Venezuelan comes into the port. It gets refined into gasoline. Some of it's sold in the U.S., some of it's exported back out. I would rather take Canadian crude, bring it down here, have it refined. We'll probably end up building another refinery and adding more additional jobs. There are construction jobs along the way. Plus, here's something that not very many people focus on. The price of global crude is set by the Brent price, the North Sea price. That's about 20% higher than West Texas Intermediate. Right now, a lot of our West Texas crude cannot get to the refineries because there's not enough pipeline capacity. The southern portion of the Keystone would move that West Texas, Panhandle, Texas, and Oklahoma crude down to be refined, giving us cheaper crude, which could bring down gasoline prices.
He's not only a lawyer, he's a chemist, he's also a regulator, Derek. Thank you, guys, all three of you, for being here. It was a great discussion. And we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Click on the local program bar, red, white, and blue. Read about our guests, watch the shows, along with our follow-up discussion.
Houston Public Media and the Greater Houston Partnership invites you to watch a special edition of Red, White, and Blue, Conversations with the Candidates, the United States Senate, on Thursday, May 3rd at 7 o'clock. All six will be here, David, the Big Six. This live bipartisan multimedia event will be broadcast from Houston PBS here in Houston, simulcast on KUHF-FM 88.7 in Houston, streamed live on KUHF.org. Plus, my God, it will be carried statewide across public radio and PBS television stations. We're going to have a lot of fun, David, and so until next time, get informed, get active.